is that the karma that you receive from others is discharging. The ones that you create are the ones that you create. Does that make sense to people? Like, let me know if that makes sense to y'all. Okay, so Kira Chell is saying, so what you're saying, if no one wants to be friends with me, it just means I don't have much karmic debt? No, that's not what I'm saying. So I think that is a interpretation, but I think that the likelihood of that being true is very, very, very low. So what we want to do with that question is, if no one wants to be friends with me, it just means I don't have much karmic debt. That's a question where, like, you have to think about the mind that is producing the question and the perception of the situation. Okay, so how do you know that no one wants to be friends with you? And it's very possible that people do want to be friends with you, and that, like, you're not seeing their desire for friendship. It's possible. Right, so this is where we have to be super careful, because if we really want to understand, like, the principles of karma, if we're not careful, our vasana, samskared mind will interpret the laws of karma based on our existing circumstances, and usually in a negative way. So a pure mind is required to perceive karma properly. It's very difficult. Okay? And that has certain philosophical weaknesses to that idea. And this, I'm not, once again, trying to preach. I'll just say, like, there's a counter argument to that, right? So I'm just laying out different perspectives here. And that is like, okay, so once you say that you require a pure mind, right? This is kind of like this non-falsifiable hypothesis sort of thing. So you can always make the argument that, like, oh, your mind isn't pure enough, your mind isn't pure enough. That's why you don't understand. It's real, it's true, but you're just too infantile to understand it. You're too impure to understand it. That doesn't make it false. It just means that you're not capable of understanding. So there's a really insidious counter argument to what I just said. Or, like, it's an important thing to consider, right? So y'all should take what I say with a grain of salt. That just really hasn't been my experience. And what I tend to find is that if you kind of, like, look at that question, now we're going to really lose some people, but for those of y'all that stay with me, hopefully I can thread this needle. See, anytime, so, like, if you're someone who says, the reason I don't have friends, ... and then I tell you the theory of karma, and you say, the reason I don't have friends is the theory of karma, fine. If I talk about autism or ADHD or whatever, or how, like, loneliness and social skills atrophy, you could say, the reason I don't have friends is social skills atrophy. The reason I don't have friends is technology. The reason I don't have friends is feminism. The reason I don't have friends is misogyny. You can find all kinds of explanations that slide into your core premise. The reason I do not have friends. And that's what I mean by the perceptual problem. Is what you should really be looking at is not the reason I have friends is ... is not the ... It's looking at your experience of not having friends. Does that make sense? Makes logical sense, but is hard to apply? Absolutely. And if your view has a lot of good counter arguments, why do you still hold it? What a great question. So, a couple things to understand about why I teach what I teach. So I teach for two reasons. One is that I have certain experiences, I have jnana, that in my opinion is superior to the logical arguments. Because what I've discovered about logic, as I've studied logic, is that there's a core problem with logic, which is that logic is perfectly pure. Agreed. Right? 2 + 2 is 4. E equals mc squared. Totally fine. The problem is that as we look at human beings, so you can take someone who's conservative, you can take someone who's liberal, you can take someone who is from this country, you can take someone who's from this country. Take your pick of dueling countries. And they will, both human beings will tell you they are perfectly logical in their beliefs. right? Conservative way is right. Liberal way is right. This religion is right. This religion is wrong. This social approach is right. This social approach is wrong. We should strive for equality. We should strive for equality of opportunity. We should strive for equality of outcome. Everyone believes they're logical. Which logic is correct? Oh, that's right. Your logic is correct and mine is wrong. Oh, fuck. So if you ask 99% of human beings on the planet what's logical, it's the thing that I believe. So at some point, I started to wonder about the value of logic, because we really have to have a very pure mind to be able to perceive logic. And that's what we try to do even in psychotherapy, is we try to remove some of these things like cognitive biases, black and white thinking, all these kinds of things where everyone believes they're logical. Even the suicidal patient who wants to kill themselves believes that they're logical. And sometimes they are, by the way. Right? So it's not that logic is wrong. It's that, how do we know that our logic is correct? And that's where, for me personally, I couldn't figure that out very easily. Whereas there's some things of experience that are very foundational and are really easy to apply. I don't need to understand the logic to understand that hot tea can burn me. I mean, there's a logic there, right? Is that actions have consequences and stuff like that. So that's sort of what I mean, is if you really base things on the foundation of your experience, it'll be true for you. Which is sort of the best that we can do, right? I don't know what's true for everybody else. I just know what's true for me. And even then, the reason that I understand the counter arguments and I offer the counter arguments is because I'm a skeptic, and I've also found that believing something just because you experienced it is also incorrect. You should always know what the counter argument is. You should always be aware that it's not so I've been on this journey for, let's say, 20 years. And 2 years in, I thought I understood things. And then 2 years later, I realized some of those are wrong. And 20 years later, I realized some of those are wrong. Who am I to think that, the lecture I'm giving y'all today is 100% correct? Of course not. Half of the shit that I'm telling y'all is wrong. It has to be. That's statistically likely. So let us always remember that whatever we believe it in this moment for now. Maybe tomorrow I'll have a transformative meditative experience that will change all of my thinking. I'll come back and I'll say, the theory of karma is utter bullshit. So why do I tell you this stuff anyway? The reason I'm presenting some of the counter arguments is because I don't want y'all to take what I'm telling you and just ingest it. Because I don't know if I'm right. I'm offering this to you. Right? And then the thing is that you shouldn't believe me. You should test it. And then you decide, can you tell the difference between an action that is done with ego and an action that is done without ego? When you help someone on the street, how long do you hold on to the goodness of who you are? Can you tell the difference between you being bound to something and creating a karma? Which, by the way, we're going to talk about in Tantra next month. We're going to talk about the intentional creation of karmas, which is what Tantra is about. Tantra is we're stuck here. I don't give a fuck. Now that I know the rules of the universe, I'm going to bend the universe to my will to create what I want in this life. That's what Tantra is. It's not about vairagya or detachment. See, the yogis try to escape from this stuff. The tantrics are holy shit, this is how the universe works. Let me craft it to live the life that I want. Don't piece out of the game. Life is a sandbox game. Let me build stuff, what I want. So there's different philosophies. Okay? So the whole point is that, and then this is the last thing to kind of say, and I really do believe this. So right today, you guys look at me like I'm the expert, which is fair, right? So there's an objective stance on this. But this is something that y'all have to understand. This is the karma that I've seen. I'm not the expert. One of y'all or many of y'all are the experts. So the real advantage, what we're really doing here is I am discharging a karmic debt to y'all so that you guys can learn this stuff, guys, girls, everything in between. Y'all can learn this stuff earlier than hopefully I did, or give it you some kind of exposure. You have some past life stuff, and then y'all will come next. right? The whole point is for the student to outshine the master. And I'm even assuming that y'all are the students here and that I'm the master here, but like that's the point. And so at some point, someone will say, if you say to yourself, I think Dr. K is wrong, I think this is how it is, like, yes, trust yourself. The whole point is my knowledge can only extend so far. I can only extend so far. I'm not enlightened. And so y'all have to move next. You have to go forward from where I put you. I can only take you so far. The rest of it, you have to go on your own. And then you will understand more than I understand. Okay? Yeah, so Kira Chell is saying, oh shit, my dad taught me to never trust myself. And so that's what we're here to balance. Your dad taught you never to trust yourself, and you have literally thousands, if not tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or millions of people who are trying to tell you the opposite. That's what we're doing here. We're a community. This is AOE healing. One person has created such a karmic consequence in your life that this is what it takes to undo it. So take what we have to offer as a community. Don't take what I have to offer. This is also where chat comes in. We're all a part of this. Madison is saying, can't believe how much I've learned in 2 months for a grand total of $20. Well, that's what we're here for. Right? So, you guys want to know this sneaky reason for the pricing? The more money we charge y'all, the less karmic debt Dr. K gets to discharge. Oh my God. There it is. But seriously, that's why we did this, right? We did this to try to help. And so that's a win for us. Okay. Next question. And if you guys find good value in it, tell your friends. Okay? I have debts to discharge to them as well. All right. So my life is determined by the karma of previous lives. So if I was an asshole in the last life, then the quality of this life is capped. What a great question. Okay. So now we're diving into more about karma. So, okay. Not saint. See, you guys are still missing it. Everyone's like, oh, Saint Dr. K. No, fucking debtor Dr. K. Do y'all get that? Do you understand? Like, y'all are still not getting it. It's not saint. It's in debt. Debtor. Fucking deadbeat Dr. K. This is what I mean. You have to really take what I'm saying and like discard all of your previous conditioning. I'm not a saint. I'm in debt. You don't want to be where I am. Okay. What's your interest rate for this karma? I don't know, but it's certainly piled up quite a bit. Okay. Y'all are the loan sharks. Okay, so let's get to the question. So my life is determined by the karma of previous lives. So if I was an asshole the last life, then the quality of this life is capped. All right. So the answer is technically yes, but practically no. See, this is something we have to understand. In our society today, we don't like to admit to people that their life is limited. Right? We say like, oh my God, like you can accomplish anything you put your mind to. You can be anything you want in this world. Like you just put your mind to it, like all potential is available to you. We say this kind of stuff. I don't think that that's factually true. So let's forget about karma for a second. So if a kid was born in West Bengal 20 years ago, could that kid ever be president of the United States? I'm going to go ahead and say no. Or if the answer is yes, it's quite asymptotic towards no, right? What is the likelihood if I want to be an esports pro, right? What is the likelihood that I could become an esports pro or an Olympic athlete? I would say that these are practically impossible for me. And I would say that there are all kinds of things that are practically impossible for most human beings on the planet. simple example is like, can I ever give birth? I'm going to go ahead and say no. I'm not trying to get into transgender dynamics or anything like that. I'm just sort of saying that, like, I have certain limitations, right? So, like, human beings all have limitations. Like, I don't think you can accomplish anything that you want in life. I've seen a lot of people who want a lot of things and whose circumstances cap them in some way. Case in point, my friend who has an intellectual disability. I don't think that my friend can become a Nobel Prize winning scientist. Like, maybe that makes me a bad friend because I don't believe in them. I don't know when we started believing that all human beings are capable of everything, because something really insidious has happened. When we started believing that, like, we sort of left the responsibility to them. Because the moment that you say that, okay, you are capable of everything that you want in this life, my responsibility goes away because you're capable. Why do I need to do anything? You can do it all by yourself. So I know, I mean, like, maybe this is going to get me canceled, but I just don't think scientifically that any human being can accomplish whatever they want to in this world. So there's some kind of capping there. Right? So, like, I've seen children who have died of cancer. And I don't believe that, like, that child could have accomplished anything that they put their minds to. Like, I just don't. I mean, I've seen them diagnosed with very aggressive leukemias and lymphomas and stuff like that. For some reason, oncologic cancers. I've seen 24-year-olds diagnosed with rapidly progressing glioblastoma multiforme. And I don't think that that person could have done shit about it. Like, I don't know where we get this idea that all human beings can accomplish all things. Actually, I do know, and we're going to get to that. So why do we always say this? It's because we want to believe that we're capable of whatever we put our mind to. And this too, like, I think this comes from, there was a time when human beings didn't believe that all humans are capable of all things. That was the standard accepted view. And that led to a lot of problems. I think that started to lead to a very deterministic and toxic way in the world. Right? So we started to develop class systems or caste systems where we said your future is determined by your birth. You don't rise above your station. So you can look at medieval ages in, like, you know, like when we had feudalistic systems in Europe, caste system in India. There are all kinds of class differentiations in the history of humanity. And once that sort of became the truism, what we started doing is actually using that as a tool for oppression. So now we have this, like, counterbalancing of equality and independence and all that stuff, which I think on the whole is good. But I don't believe that if you're someone who's born with cerebral palsy, or you had a nuchal cord times 2 and had transient severe hypoxia during the course of birth, that you can accomplish whatever you want to in life. I just don't know how to believe that. Like, if someone believes I'm wrong, please explain it to me, because I'm all ears. So somewhere along the way, we like started, so first we were like, okay, it's fucking destined, and we use that as a source of oppression. So then we counterbalance things and we said, we're all equal, anyone is capable, and then that's the way that things swung. I think that's in the right direction. And now we've gotten to this idea that you can do anything that you're capable of, which I don't think is the case. I mean, you can do anything maybe that you're capable of, but you can't do anything that you put your mind to. Like, you just, I don't know. I've just seen some examples where I don't think that that's viable. So then the question kind of becomes, okay, so, like, does this mean that I'm capped because I was an asshole? I think practically no. So, like, I don't know what way you mean by capped. But I don't think that a child born in West Bengal 20 years ago is capable of being president of the United States. Like, we have laws in the United States that say that you can't be a naturalized citizen and become president. So those laws would have to change. Theoretically, I suppose it's possible. I don't think it's going to happen. I think the practicality of telling this kid who was born in West Bengal 20 years ago, you can be president of the United States one day if you want to, I think that is probably not a good idea. Maybe I'm wrong. I'll admit that I could be wrong. I'm not 100% right. This is just how I see things today. So if you were an asshole in a past life, does this mean your life is capped today? Practically no. So I think that the way that your life is practically capped is by your practical life. And whether that was because you were an asshole or not, like, I don't know why. I don't know if it was because you were an asshole or what's going on. But I think this is the key thing to understand about your karma, is that your karma gives you the circumstances of your life. It doesn't determine the destiny of your life. All it gives you is a starting position. What you do with that life is ultimately determines, in my opinion, where you go. So, like, even if I'm like, let's take like Texas Hold'em, right? So if I have a two and an 8 of clubs as my 2 cards, and someone else has pocket aces, there's no question that the other person has a better start. And yet I can still win if I play the game of life correctly and the cards end up in the right way. Right? I can win that game even though I'm at a disadvantage. And this is what I think practically what karma means. See, we get so concerned about being capped as if this destiny is not possible, whereas like we don't realize what we're really capable of. Because we think, this is the real tragedy, is that we think that the circumstances are the most important part. Because we think, okay, if I got a 2-8 club and someone has a pocket aces, life is unfair. Like, yeah. Like, I don't know how you can make an argument that life is fair. I just don't. I think the whole point of being human is to admit that life is unfair. That's why we need to work together, because some of us are luckier than others. Some of us are born in the United States, and some of us are born in West Bengal. And you can even make the argument that those of us born in the United States are more unlucky. I'm not saying which one is lucky or which one is unlucky. I'm saying that practically, as a human being, there are certain things in your life that are outside of your control. These are the circumstances in your life. And the quicker we understand as human beings that some of us get fucked and some of us are privileged, the more that we realize that, like, we should try to fix this. I think that is a good thing. I think you should try to help your fellow human beings, whether you're privileged or not privileged. Right? Do what you can. Play the game of life as best as you can with the hand that you're dealt. And in terms of being capped, like, this is where I think really it's kind of tricky, because people will sort of like throw their hands up and say karma means destiny. I mean, I think karma means circumstances. I don't think it means destiny. See, your destiny is determined by 2 things: your actions and the circumstances. And everyone thinks that in karma is absolutely your circumstances, because your circumstances are not controllable by you. So there must be some element that is outside of you that you can't control. Maybe, maybe not. Wait till we talk about Tantra. And so then if you want to live life, what ultimately determines how far you go, because everyone's worried about capped. Oh my God, you're capped. Capped at what? I don't, like, who the fuck cares where you're capped? The question is, like, how far can you go? Right? Like, everyone's worried about that 100th percentile, where it's like we're starting from 0. Like, let's go to 99 before we see how far we can go. I thought a 2.5 GPA would cap my success. Interesting. So don't worry about capped. Recognize that karma is not destiny. Karma is actions and circumstances. So the actions that you take will create the circumstances of tomorrow. Right? That's true. If I, like, drink a lot, I will be hungover tomorrow. Right? That happens. So then I wake up tomorrow in this circumstance of being hungover. So, I mean, technically, yeah, I think that your karma will cap certain things in this life, but I think practically it's not really that important. Because the other thing that I found is that when people say, oh yeah, you're capped, like I'm removing some potential from your life, and then we get hurt. What, you're telling me that I can't accomplish anything that I put my mind to? And I'm like, no, I don't know. I don't know if that's true. The majority of humans that I've worked with are not capable of accomplishing anything that they want. Maybe my sample size is messed up, but I think most human beings don't have, like, a tight correlation between what they can imagine and what they want from themselves and what their life actually is. And the other thing that I think is completely silly is that I don't even think it matters whether you're capped or not. And then you may say, what does that mean, Dr. K? Because okay, just hear me out. So let's say that you are uncapped. What would you want? Okay, I want to be president of the United States. Why do you want to be president of the United States? What does that mean to you? Once again, this is a hypothetical. This is a belief. Well, then if I'm president of the United States, then I'll be powerful and I will be happy. Okay, hold on a second. If your goal is to be powerful and to be happy, let's understand what it means to be powerful. Let's understand what it means to be happy. Because I think you can check both of those boxes without being president of the United States. I think you can check both of those boxes if you're a kid who was born in West Bengal. So this is the reason why I think it really is not that important what you're capped at. Because the reason that we want to be uncapped is because we will achieve something. And that achievement is correlated with certain things that we want, like satisfaction and joy and freedom. And those I think you can get. Because you control some element of that. You literally control some element of your satisfaction, some element of your freedom, and some element of your joy. And then the question becomes, how much do you control and how do you get better at it? And when you start answering that question, what you're capable of becomes completely irrelevant because you can shortcut it to like here and now. Does that make sense? Yeah, so someone's saying, GVDV is saying, hello, yeah, worse to be uncapped, which direction to take? That's what I mean. Right? So we're like all attached to this idea, like, don't restrict my future, bruh. Like, I can do anything that I want. Like, yeah, I mean, I think you can do a lot of what you put your mind to. I think your mind is very powerful. So I think, yeah. You know, I think that's kind of true. That there are going to be some circumstances in your life which I think are outside of your control. And then the question is, what is responsible for those circumstances? I personally find the theory of karma to be helpful. But you can make just as much of an argument for like random chance and entropy as the governing principles of the universe. That's fine. And even the science says that the important thing is not which one is true, but that you have a system that is internally consistent and explains that you can make sense of the world with. So you can believe in God, not believe in God. You can believe in karma, not believe in karma. You can be a biological reductionist, not a biological reductionist. The most important thing is that you have a system that works for helping you navigate the world. That's really what the science shows as the important thing. Okay. And then my last question of the day. Oh, actually, okay, let me see if I can. We're going to kind of, I don't know if speedrun is the right word, but. No. How do I? Hold on a second. Give me a second, chat. There's an image here. Let's see if we can export to a PDF. We can look at them. Okay, I'm exporting to a PDF. Okay, and then we will look at this, okay? Okay. What is Dr. K's Sangha? So, a couple of things. So in some ways, I have a lot of different sanghas. So I used to have a much more robust sangha when I was like part of a meditative community and things like that. You know, I have my cohort from med school and things like that. We have a lot of different sanghas. I think this is a sangha of mine, right? So the AOE healing community is a fun sangha to be a part of. It's fun to be a content creator sangha. It's that kind of fun. But I think, I mean, the way that I would honestly answer that question is that I think I sort of have a weird sangha of one, is how it feels sometimes. is that I was I was part of my truest Sangha is a Sangha that very few people are part of, and that like I don't encounter them often. But I think there's like just people like us is what I would describe it as. And I think the other thing that I've started to appreciate, which I know sounds kind of weird, is, or especially over the last year as I've been meditating, I've sort of noticed that, like, this may not make a whole lot of sense, but I feel like more connected to the divine. And so the Sangha that I'm really trying to cultivate is like that Sangha. The problem is that Sangha is very difficult to cultivate because it requires quite extensive meditation practice and like quite dedicated meditation practice, which requires a fair amount of like sacrifice in other domains of my life. So I feel drawn to a community which I find in meditation, which I don't think it's like, so I know it sounds kind of weird, but some of y'all may know what I'm talking about. You don't, I mean, that's just the answer. So the whole point of this is that like, I give the answer, right? It doesn't have to make a whole lot of sense. This is one that isn't going to make a whole lot of sense, unfortunately. But I just feel like a connection and draw to like something in meditation more profoundly over the last year, and then even the last 20 years. So. That's the Sangha that I'm trying to cultivate, I should say. Okay. Now, so this is going to be a quick one. So can people hold on to relationships just because the relationship has turned into a vasana? I would say that a lot of people hold on to relationships because they are vasanas. So I'd say that the number one reason that people maintain relationships in life is because there is a history of maintenance. There's momentum in the relationship. I think people tend to stay in relationships for far too long because of their mental habits. See, once we have a particular vasana, then we like operate within that vasana. It involves other kinds of people. So sometimes when I work with people who are using substances, right, because addiction psychiatry and all that, a lot of these relationships are maintained by mental habits, like potheads. I have my friends who get high. We all get high together. That's what we do, right? My friends who drink, even gaming friends. So we maintain these relationships that are really stemmed from vasana. Now, vasana isn't always bad, okay? So sometimes it's good to have vasanas. Vasanas are just habits. They're mental habits. The problem is that we oftentimes don't realize when there's a vasana. So intentional vasana is fine. Like I have mental habits with my family, which is not a bad thing. But I should be aware that this is a mental habit, right? I don't want it to be running on autopilot. Okay. But yeah, I think like y'all are getting it. That's what that question tells me. Okay. Last question. Then we gotta bounce. If your social skills were stopped from developing at an early age because of trauma, is there a rough plan of action you would recommend to start building them? Is it substantially different to building back up social skills that have just rusted? I'm functional socially now, but it took 7 years of floundering to get there, so I'm wondering if there's a more efficient roadmap. Okay. So I didn't mean to laugh at this person. I'm not laughing at the person. I'll tell you all why I was laughing in a second. I was just laughing at the efficient roadmap. So the first thing is that it's harsh that some of us grow up in circumstances that are traumatic, and we really get punished for that for like years, decades. So trauma lingers and shapes our future, which is the real challenge. So there's something to understand about trauma. The first thing is that trauma is the one pathology of psychiatry. It's the one illness or diagnosis in trauma. I mean, PTSD is a diagnosis, but see, we tend to think that these are all mental illnesses, but trauma really isn't. So mental illness is something that is a pathology. It is something that malfunctions. But trauma is an adaptation. It is something that our body, our brain, our mind, whatever, adapts to survive our circumstances. This is truly what trauma is. It is a way to survive, not a malfunction. The problem is that the adaptations that we make to survive when we are young become maladaptations later in life. So it helped me survive yesterday, but it creates problems today. So I do think that there is a big difference between trauma and just being socially rusty. So we know that the way that your brain wires in trauma, which don't worry, it can be rewired, is different. And rusty can also be viewed as a change in wiring. But I mean, there are things that are different. So this is why we did a guide on trauma, and this, we explain this over the course of the whole guide. It should come out in a couple months. But just to give you all an example, so like, here we are. So we literally have, a whole section on relationships, and then you get into things like avoidant attachment or anxious attachment, anxious ambivalent attachment. These attachment styles go way beyond what we describe as like social skills atrophy or rusted social skills, right? This is the way that your brain thinks relationships are formed. So there are things that you have to do specifically for trauma. So I think the first thing that you have to do is to understand in trauma, there's one problem. I mean, there's a lot of problems, but this is kind of how I conceptualize it. One of the core problems, for example, is something called hemispheric lateralization. So hemispheric lateralization means that we have two parts of our brain. We have our right brain and our left brain, and they're connected by this thing called the corpus callosum in the middle. And generally speaking, right brain does emotional stuff, left brain does analytical stuff. So as we go through life, we have these two parts of the brain that are communicating. When these two parts of the brain are in very good concert, when there's a lot of synchronicity across the brain, we function well as human beings. So for example, the flow state has synchronicity across the brain. So the whole brain is active in a very harmonious way. Right? So if we look at some of the signs of the flow state, right? You can't be bored, but you can't be overwhelmed. So there has to be a sufficient amount of challenge. And what does challenge do to our brain? It doesn't affect the logical side, it affects the emotional side. It gets us excited, engaged. It's not boring, then we're not engaged. So if you think about what engages you with activities, oftentimes it's the right level of emotion. It's hype. Let's go. And then we also need our analytical brain functioning, because if we just have an overwhelming signal from our emotional brain, then we'll be so hype, we'll be so excited, right? So this is what we see in mania, where people who are manic will have like an overabundance of positive emotion, but their left brain is so disorganized or not functioning properly that they're really excited about a project, but it doesn't make any logical sense. And you'll know this, that when you get overly excited about a project, your actual work product is not as good as if you were like moderately excited. So we know that when the brain is connected, it works well. So in trauma, what happens with hemispheric lateralization is we lateralize to one side of the brain. This is literally what happens in dissociation. So I think Bessel van der Kolk maybe did some of this original fMRI research, where some researchers, trauma researchers, discovered that the activity across the corpus callosum decreases in people who have experienced trauma growing up. So the left and right brain don't talk to each other. We dissociate. So what does that mean practically? It means that like I'm going through something bad, but I don't feel it. I'm looking dispassionately at my life. Something really bad is happening to me, but I feel no negative emotions. So as long as your brain is wired that way, it is very difficult to form connections with people, because you are unplugged from your emotions. If you are unplugged from your emotions, it's very difficult to send and receive empathic signals. Because if you're dissociating and you never express any emotions, then like people won't receive emotions. Right? So if I lecture like this, and then I go blah, 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 but y'all are smiling. Right? Because even though I try to be as monotone as possible, I will be monotone, blah, 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 blah. I'm trying to be monotone, but in my brain, my emotions are excited. And so you can even pick up on it. So in the same way that I can try to repress it, but if it's active, and y'all are going to receive it no matter what I try to do. Okay? So when we come to trauma, there's some of these fundamentals that have changed. And these fundamentals need to be addressed but like the more we address these fundamentals, the easier it will be to form relationships. So hemispheric lateralization and emotional disconnection / dissociation will make empathy hard, will make forming connections hard. There's also a physiologic side to it, where remember when we talked yesterday about the more adrenaline and cortisol and noradrenaline I have in my system, it shapes the way that I think. I get in my own head. Danger feels more real. And I can't connect with someone else because I'm stressed out. So the other thing that we see in trauma is that the threshold to trigger a stress response is way lower. So in a situation that is 20, like pretty chill, people who have a history of trauma will be super stressed out in chill situations. And that's because they need just a tiny amount of stress signal to trigger the whole mechanism. So it's like they've got an itchy trigger finger when it comes to releasing cortisol, adrenaline, noradrenaline, activating their sympathetic nervous system. So this is also where you have to rewire that. I would say that like that's the answer that I have now, right? So I think there are other pieces. So like I'd say, first of all, get back in touch with your emotions. Secondly, get back in touch with your body. And as you do these two things, those will be a really good foundation for the rest of the stuff. But then if y'all want a more complete answer where we go through basically, not every, but like, most of the dimensions of trauma, at least as how I conceive of them. So the trauma guide's a little bit different because we start with physiology and then we work all the way up. We start with like your body and then we go to your brain and then we go to even like relationships, right? So that's even things outside of you. And then eventually we end up with spirituality. So that's what I would say. So yeah, there are other things that you should do. It's not as simple as just becoming unrusty. Okay. How do you know what is ADHD and what is trauma? So that's where like a good clinician can really go a long way. That's our job, right? So you can have cognitive deficits or cognitive difficulties with like concentration, memory, and trauma, which is, part of the pathology. And then you've got ADHD, which is like different. So that's where a professional comes in. All right, y'all, I know that we usually are supposed to do an hour lecture, but I always run long, which I'm okay with if y'all are okay with. And then we'll see y'all, I think on March 6th or something. And we're going to be doing Tantra. And I think Tantra and discipline are the topics for next month. So super excited about that. Thank y'all very much for coming these last couple days. Enjoy your weekend. And we'll see y'all in a week or two.